So, welcome, everybody. We are recording now. It's a Sunday evening. I'm actually going to hide the chat for a bit, and then obviously we will switch it back on here. So, basically, get all your questions ready afterwards. What I'll do is have like a bit of an overview on obviously what what is happening, what has been happening, and obviously then we can open it up for question and answers afterwards. That's obviously normally how we deal with everything. Not obviously much news has happened this weekend. It's been pretty quiet. One of the things that's been relatively interesting is there is talks, or there's talks, nuclear talks with Iran and the US this week. So could be quite interesting. Gold could be one to look out for on the back of this. Why? All right, lots of you who are obviously, new to, I guess, a little bit more of a macro way of, looking at things is, you know, you, whenever there's any, turmoil or indecision, it could be created by an event or, by, markets not obviously acting, how they're, supposed to. A little bit like obviously, gold had a little pump Friday due to, lower than expected, obviously, CPI data, which is obviously, inflation data. We obviously bought gold off the back of that. Why? Because, if it's lower inflation data, then it's going to be less pressure on the Federal Reserve to obviously reduce interest rates, and so it'd be really interesting to see how markets open up this week, what's going to happen. But I'm going to be keeping an eye on this meeting. I think it's in Switzerland, with obviously US and Iran, and it's basically about, nuclear talks. They obviously need to have some kind of an agreement. I've done a little bit of research into Russia, Ukraine. They're very close to signing a peace treaty. However, one thing that Ukraine is asking for, they want the US's protection guaranteed for 20 years, apparently. So, that's obviously one thing that, is waiting to be agreed. Because obviously, it's a bit of a tricky one, this, because obviously you've got, Russia. You've obviously got, Russia, um, who are, who Trump's obviously trying to stay friendly with Putin. Obviously, US, Russia, and China are the three big powerhouses in the world. So obviously need to stay friendly with with obviously all of those guys. He's doing a pretty good job. So far they're obviously doing a lot of business together. So yeah, let's wait and see. Because obviously him offering that for 20 years, yes, it's gonna agree a peace treaty, but then it's gonna kind of irritate Russia. So there's a couple of things obviously going on in the background, and then yeah. So that's let's obviously wait and see what happens here. Like I always mentioned to everyone, all right, it's obviously hard to kind of give that overview of obviously exactly what's going to happen this week. So what I tend to do on a Friday, on sorry, Friday on Sunday, I look at the overview. All right, and obviously I did a COT report for everyone in a circle. This is how big money institutions are obviously looking at obviously their overall positions. You got obviously euro. There's a lot of obviously long positions. Pound, that there's a lot of long positions. Aussie is in between. You got gold starting to pick up, but it's a bit in between. And then yen is heavy. Like, yeah, Yen is one, all right. USDJPY, we actually didn't do too bad on this on Friday, but obviously yen is one. It's due a big drop. There's been this intervention being threatened for a good couple of weeks now, and so yeah, yen is one which I don't really want to miss out, but I'm prepared to kind of miss out, once this, potential, if it happens, the intervention where, yen's obviously got the negative interest rates, minus 10 point one basis points. So overall, if they change this, which they haven't changed it for a very, very long time, if they do change it, then obviously, we're going to see, yen strengthen up hugely. So I'm always, whenever I'm trading against yen, and obviously we only trade USDJPY, we trade just to obviously rewind for anyone new here. We obviously trade five pairs. My expertise is the US dollar. I can get macros and trend right. I would say about 90% of the time, so we're always going, we're with it, we're always doing, well. So yeah, that's obviously what I like to yeah, to kind of target. So we target obviously AD USD, GBP USD, Euro USD, gold and USD JPY, and that means that we are always on the the right side of everything. Yeah, let's wait and see obviously what happens here. One thing that took a massive tumble, for those of you who don't look at it, you should, yields, right? It's called US 10Y. What yields do is they obviously give you that kind of overview of how much money is coming into the US economy, because obviously these are bonds. All right, and obviously this here is the percentage return. So obviously naturally, if you look at this middle of Jan, we're up to like 4.3% return on government bonds. Now we're obviously down to around about 4%. So obviously that's gonna, along with a lower interest rate, that's gonna obviously reduce money, all right, coming into the US, So there's lots of small things that you can look at to give you that edge. And obviously, the US dollar, I personally think is probably the easiest currency to trade against. I always recommend having one commanding currency, whether it's pound, euro, US dollar, and trade everything off of that, because then you've only got to specialize in one. And then obviously you've got obviously five different options, and you're obviously gonna pretty much always be on the right side of it. So yeah, let's wait and see what happens. Stock markets here are good too, obviously, because we're trading the US dollar. Obviously, I've got the US stock markets here. We don't trade them, but obviously we utilize them also as a tool, because money's either flowing in three ways. It's either flowing into the stock market, which nine times out of ten it's going to be flowing into yields and the dollar, and then it's going to be flowing out of gold. All right, but these are like the four kind of things you want to look out for, which are stocks, yields, the dollar, and gold. Yeah. All right. These are obviously, that's the only way, kind of four ways money, flows. Occasionally it can flow into yen. All right. Occasionally that can be your other one. But yeah, that's obviously the main four things that obviously, you can utilize and take advantage of. Now, what's obviously happened with the US dollar? All right. We've got a daily here, and obviously, what's interesting here is Monday last week. I think it was Monday last week. Yep, we've obviously, crashed from 700 all the way down to below, basically 1987. Now, how do I utilize this? And obviously, why have I got, these yellow lines marked up? All right, what I would recommend everyone on the DXY, and obviously, you can see how well they react. There is a reason why, and yes, because obviously, yes, institutions work off of round numbers, and the US dollar is no different at all. So if you've got these marked up, I've got them every 500. You can kind of utilize it, all right? And obviously, how I kind of utilize this is probably right now. If price, where I don't think we've moved too much. I'm not surprised about where we kind of are. Price is kind of working out here. All right. But overall here, I am bearish on the dollar. All right. So, I'd rather short the dollar. Yeah. But obviously, when I'm going to look to potentially change my attitude is when, 97 is broken. All right. Because then obviously everyone knows trading 101, resistance once broken adds as, support and then potentially, should have a rebound off of that. But, that's obviously how I'm looking at it right now. This 97 is key. Anywhere below, gotta be looking to, sell it. Anything above, gotta be looking to potentially shift, sentiment to buy it. Now, one thing that I also do differently, and obviously I'll remind everyone who's, in a circle is how I like to trade. All right, we're gonna look at the DXY, we're going to look at yields, and we're going to look at, stocks. All right. And then, in the background, I'm going to look at the macro overview too. All right. Now, all we've got to do is look at, macros and then, yields, stocks and the dollar. And then we've already identified which direction we're going to trade. Yeah. All right. So, for example, if I'm trading USD CAD, I then, know if I'm going to sell the dollar. All right. Rather than me hopping on a chart and then thinking, right, do I buy from here? Do I sell here? We all we're doing is we, know which direction we're going to take this. All right, we're trading this way. All right, and then all we've got to do really, really easily is just mark up, where we potentially think price might come into. Where's it going to, struggle? Yeah. All right, so I'm just obviously drawing these on quickly, but you can draw as many as you want on. All right, say for example, we've got this, let me just get rid of this. And then we've got this one here. All right, these are going to be your potential, hiccups where things might decide to go against you. Yeah. All right. Now, all you're going to do here, right, is this is up to you then. How aggressive are you going to play it? What are the chances? Yes, I mean, this would be the best risk to reward up here, but what are the chances of it coming back to this area? All right, so then you're going to think, right, well, I got this, zone here, I got this one here. Probably price might not go up here because, it's quite strong. So then obviously you're going to take these ones out, yeah? All right. And then you've got to then work out, right, well, what are the chances of price going here? Am I confident? What you can also do if you really want to is you could put one here, yeah? And then get rid of this one and then get rid of this one here. And then obviously this will be your entry, zone here. Yeah. And then obviously, you are happy anywhere, you know, um, a- a- anywhere within this, zone here, you are happy to obviously trade this to the downside. Yeah. And then, you're probably then thinking, right, you know what? I think, it's probably not that great, but obviously, if we're obviously breaking above here, then trend is going to change. And obviously, potentially long term, we might then be looking at this angle here. Yeah. All right, so that's kind of a bit of a nutshell how I like to trade. Now that let's obviously have a look at what we've got coming up this week. Like I always say, you don't have to understand it. Just obviously make a note of anything that's a bit interesting coming out. All right, and then at least you want to trade round it. How I look at fundamentals is, imagine the news is going to create a wave, yeah? All right, a wave meaning obviously a increase in orders, whichever way there is an increase. Yeah, I don't care what anyone tells me. It's not technicals that creates these waves. It is it's obviously the data that comes out. It's going to obviously fill people with either instilled confidence or a lack of confidence, and then it's going to obviously create these waves, and then our job is to wait for these waves to be created. I mean, this is going to be a terrible drawing now, guys, and then obviously we are there. Let's give our surfer some hair. All right, our job is to then ride them, yeah. All right, but everyone, I'd say a bit of a rookie error is that, people will enter their trade here, and then, you're going to be, surfing like you guys have probably realized. Gold's a great one where, price is going this way and you're trying to buy it, and yeah, but rather than waiting for these waves to be created, makes it very, very easy. All right. It makes trading really, really easy. Yeah. So right, let's have a look what's coming up. So we got a US, well, yeah, US holiday, Canadian holiday. Not a lot really to worry about. So tomorrow could be slow trading. Tuesday, we've got RBA meeting minutes. This is obviously going to affect our Aussie trades. However, because I don't hold trades over, night, the Aussie news doesn't really affect me too much. All right. So, and then obviously we've got, 7 a.m. We've got the unemployment rate. This could be interesting actually, because every currency kind of follows. All right. So if there is a bit of optimism in the pound, um, obviously US unemployment rate dropped, last week. If you paid attention, there is potential. I think this might come in as a drop. But obviously, where I'm say 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be sending in my morning trade. So probably around 6:45-ish. I will wait until quarter past, 7 on Tuesday. So, because obviously we want this to come out, we want it to create a wave, and then we obviously want to hop on it. CAD, we don't really trade, so I'm not really worried about their inflation too much. And then we've got potentially might look into this, but it's not going to worry me too much. Few speakers. Wednesday, we got obviously more pound. Looks like it's going to be a heavy pound week this week. So, and then obviously we got some durable goods data for the dollar, and then obviously we've got FOMC meeting minutes. Got Atlanta GDP as well. Thursday, obviously, again, doesn't really affect us because we're not going to have any trades open. But obviously, Aussie unemployment rate, we've got some jobs data coming out, and obviously, manufacturing data for Philadelphia too. And then obviously, yeah, more jobless claims, so that's going to be pretty important. Friday, we got some GDP data, which will be pretty big. So, what you can kind of highlight here is we've obviously got, loads and loads of pound data. All right, we've then got some obviously dollar and then Aussie, right? So, if you don't want to trade the, same pairs that obviously I trade, what you would be looking out for is right, you know what, Aussie, pound, and the dollar are going to be, quite interesting to trade this week. So there's a lot of data. So there's going to be a lot of liquidity coming in. All right, so we should have a bit of a slow day, I would imagine, tomorrow. Gold, this was our trade from Friday. Nice. Obviously, wait for CPI data to come out. You always get that 50% retracement afterwards. So this was CPI data here, retraced in. All right, and then obviously off we go. Very, very nice. Wham bam. Thank you, ma'am. So I actually think gold is gonna probably tap into this area here. But I don't think there's enough at the moment to push it much higher. At the same time, I don't think there's enough to push it, lower. Now, one interesting thing about gold, which I've researched, and euro, is that obviously there is a lot of orders happening on both gold and euro. So what sometimes happens is you get a bit of a price, what they call a squeeze, where orders are driven down to, yes, to pragmatically take a proportion of the buyers out. And then obviously you get the big, move which happens afterwards. So just be careful, that's what moves like this are all about, and then potentially even things like this, where they'll kind of, markets looking like it's coming down, and then obviously it starts to drive up. If you look closely at these candles here, right around this area, you guys cannot argue. Yeah, if you're obviously watching this happen here, it's a 30-minute hourly. Let's go back on it. There we go. Hourly here. If you're obviously watching this happen, you're potentially gonna, look to buy. And obviously that's the biggest like trick here. Because all that happens is then you just get crushed. So that is what potentially might happen this week. There is a lot of long orders on dollar, and also interesting enough, euro has got lots of orders. So I mean, if euro comes down into this area, I'm going to buy the hell out of it, and I do think this might happen because, interesting enough, pound moved up quite fluidly Friday. Aussie kind of stayed where it was. Yen obviously, moved down a tiny bit, but euro stayed there. It didn't really move anywhere, and it's because there's obviously a lot of orders. And obviously we'll see obviously what happens here. But I'm pumped for this week. I think it's going to be a really, really good week trading. Right, I've switched the chat on. That's obviously enough of me waffling here. So does anyone have any there? Does anyone have any questions? Any questions at all? It's just, you can see here. Here's the journal. Smashing it. Been doing really, really well. So yeah, we obviously had our loss early. So let's wait and see. Right, David. Hi, Dan. Love the 10K account video. 2K come up profit. I don't have 10K yet, only 2.5. So we keep doing, my lot size is smaller. But I wondered if you would be able to show the three splits for the entry zones in your morning posts. I'm normally manic with the kids' school in the AM, so a quick visual would really help me place the trade. To be honest, I'd struggle obviously to get everything out quickly anyway, but like I mentioned, if I've still got USDJPY here, well, all right, let me do an example here. Have I got pound? Yeah, there we go. All right, so you can obviously see here. All right, I obviously write down what the top of the zone is, and then I write that down what the bottom is, and so if you just use a price range, measure it, right, it's 30 pips, so 15 pips here, that would be halfway. All right, what we do if you're obviously not, if you haven't watched the video in the inner circle, is I think lots of people get very, very keen and obviously they'll enter, as soon as it comes in. What I've, suggested to obviously help, some people is, maybe, if you haven't got time to obviously look into everything, then potentially do top, middle and bottom. And then rather than going here, say to make it easier on 1.2, lots, you go on point 0.3 here, point, sorry, my maths is bad. So point 0.4 here, point 0.4 here, and then point 0.4 here. That way you're actually going to, rather than worrying, because everyone here worries about when price goes into drawdown. If you actually split your trades and you have a plan, yes, if it goes like this and obviously carries on, you're going to be a bit irritated, yeah. But obviously, if it come, you're going to be wishing for it to come down here to tap before it goes, because then you got one, two, three great entries in. So yeah, that's obviously what I laid out in a video for the guys yesterday. Gary, hi Dan, like the 10K account video of the weekend. It was really helpful. One thing that seemed to left out important to me was a daily drawdown limit. So this is obviously one thing that's interesting, and obviously one thing that I'd speak about. All right, so depend. Let me write this in capitals. So depending on your account balance, yeah, all right, and needs, yeah. You need a, session target, all right? You need, well, two, all right? Because obviously we trade London and New York, all right? And then you need a daily target, all right? And then you need an overall drawdown target, yeah? All right. Now I can obviously guide you, but I can't tell you what these, need to be. Yeah. All right. Because, you've got to be realistic. If I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say don't target any more than 20% month on your account. But then if you're trading 300 quid, you're going to be targeting, 60 quid. Most of you are going to, laugh at me. But actually, this is a strange thing about trading is if you targeted 1% every day, all right? So for you, with say 300, all right, that's you targeting like 3 quid, Now, if I told you to make 3 quid every day, you're gonna tell me that's easy, right? Really easy. So then why aren't you making 20% every month? If it's really easy, to make, 3 quid. And it's because we're pushing it, yeah? All right. Now obviously I, can see here, all right, I get it right, probably 76% of the time, so we've got, very, very, very obviously high, high directional win rate. And obviously like I've mentioned to everyone, we obviously treat it as a basket. All right, we don't always get five trades trigger, sometimes one, sometimes two, three, up to five. Now your goal is to hit this, all right, every single day. And yes, if I was to tell you probably properly, it would be to aim for 10%. All right. But I'm also realistic. I understand, guys who have got 300 quid are going to want to make 10% a day. All right. But you've got to be prepared for when it goes wrong. All right, because trading, it doesn't matter how good you are. The best, billion dollar traders in the world, they get it wrong. All right. And you've got to make sure that you're prepared. And that is why 99% of the industry aren't making money here because 99% when it goes wrong, that 1% time will hold, and blow it up. All right, but you've got to have the expectation that you might have to use this. Yeah. All right. So if this is, I don't know, say you want to be ambitious, and you want to make 5% a day. All right. This needs to be maximum 10%. Yeah, because you've got to be there to kind of, survive. All right, there's always going to be trades out there. There's going to be a trade tomorrow, the day after, the day after. You can't get all, stressed about it. All right, but obviously I can't tell you because obviously I don't know what your, needs and your expectations are. All right, but yeah, hopefully that helps. I'll leave that one up. Anywhere to buy BTC longs. One, you're brave, very, very brave. But obviously, two, I actually think we might see a short-term pump on Bitcoin. I'm not sure where up to. I mean, I don't think it's going to fly high. We've got obviously a 200 EMA here, so potentially about 70. I mean, it's hit 70, almost 71 this weekend. Potentially could come into this area here. But obviously, yeah, I do think we're going to get a bit of a move like this where we're coming up and then we drop down, and then it's going to catch everyone out. So or what we might see happen is we might see this pop down. Everyone's hopping on, sells again, and then obviously, it pops up here. Everyone's, stopped out. It takes a load more liquidity off the table because that's all Bitcoin is interested in. If you look at Bitcoin, I've kind of changed my character on it a bit is I think governments and institutions, bigger ones like, BlackRock, etc. I think they understand that they can't control crypto. It's here, it's brilliant. Um, you know, um, it's here, it's brilliant. But obviously, what they can do is they can kind of control supply and demand. So if they can drive price down, all right, and obviously this is one thing that Michael Saylor I don't think has accounted for here, all right, is that if the minority own the majority, then obviously there's a bit of an issue there, because although governments and institutions can't control Bitcoin, they can control the price of it if they own majority of it. So that's my only worry with it right now. Aki, hi Dan, how did you translate the COT report? Easy to understand, earlier to understand it more. Easy, time and experience. Time and experience, that's all. Is macros more important than technicals? 100%, right? Anyone who tells you isn't is a 20-year-old Dubai flash watch, flash card trader. All right, everyone looks at macros before they, look at technicals. So macros create the overall directions. You can use technicals for entries, yes. All right, but use technicals for entries only. Whenever someone gives me a daily technical, that's not, this is trend you know, um, they use it as right. You know what? Bitcoin, Bitcoin has done this. I'm just making one up here, right? It's broken through this trend line, all right? So the billions and billions of pounds that are invested in Bitcoin, they're actually looking at this trend line here, all right? This is the trend line, and it's broken, and I've spotted it from my bedroom. Like this is not how it works. Okay, so yes, it'll be macros, optimism, hype that will drive, expectation that's going to drive price where it is. But yes, of course, use technicals to enter. Um, Ash, I had a good trade last week, made nearly £300, only trading from Tuesday to Friday. Epic. Well done, Ash. Sean, did you think the dollar is still classed as a safe haven? Also, with yen strength, do you think that is due to America and Fed getting involved? No, I think I don't think the dollar can be classed as a safe haven right now because obviously it's got it's yeah, I mean, with it for it to be classed as a safe haven, yields would have to be, flying high. I don't think anyone, wants, money to obviously, yeah, they're just not going to trust putting their money in the US, the dollar at the moment after, CPI data. One thing that surprised me last week was jobs. Well, we had an absolutely unbelievable NFP report on Wednesday, and then Thursday we had terrible jobless claims. Now, why the two aren't connected together, I do not understand. So yes, I don't think at the moment the dollar is going to be cast as a safe haven. Is it safer to buy at the top of the zone or wait till it comes to the middle of the zone for less risk? Oh, this is obviously for entries, yeah. Well, I would say, if we're speaking about entries, I would obviously the ideal is, having three, all right, but with a 30% of your entry each time. But obviously you've got to have that expectation that, it might just tap, number one, and then you're entering, 30% less, which is okay too, because our only job here, all right, our job as a trader is to try and get it right and take money out. All right, it's not to try and hit an imaginary TP. Now, I'm really, from obviously, some of the meetings that I had last year with hedge fund owners, they laugh. They absolutely, laugh at the fact that the whole retail market is on this, TP1 hit, TP2 hit. It's crazy. Yeah, that's obviously how it is. But no, I would say yeah. I mean, it'd be safer to buy from down here, but you've got to think of the expectation. Will price come down here before it goes up if there's more buying pressure, all right? So, it's a little bit like what I mentioned earlier. Um, Mark, in your last video, with a 10K account, example about aiming for £500 a week, so around £100 a day, what would the maximum risk you'd have on your account? Like I said, it all depends on you. Mark, I'm new to the group. Can you explain how to manage the trades? I swear that's what I've been doing here, um, um, Mark. So you need to, depending on your your kind of expectation, depending on obviously, how what your daily target is. Now, like I mentioned, either journal here, I get it right majority of the time, yeah. All right, same with my effects book here, but obviously what you've got to do, and I would probably have it a bit smaller at the beginning, Mark, is have a slightly lower daily target, because what that's going to do, it's going to really help you to obviously hit it, all right, and obviously then you're gonna it's gonna obviously instill confidence, and then obviously you're going to be trading with clear kind of mind, as opposed to worrying. So that's what I would do. But yes, anything that how I'm looking at my trades is anything that triggers, I'm in. Yeah. All right. But I'm also looking at the overview of, I've got my own targets. All right. So, if I've hit my target in the, morning, all right, morning me personally, I might let it run a bit more, just to give me that extra bit of breathing room in the afternoon. Or obviously, if we've had an okay morning, then I can afford to obviously run, my trades in the afternoon, a bit more. And so, yeah, but no, I don't look at, I put obviously TPs up, but I don't like them because, obviously our goal is to achieve a target. If you're not achieving, a target, you're just trading, you're basically trading to kind of hit an overall, number. Yeah. And obviously, your goal is to write, I want to get 20 quid out of the markets, 100 quid out of the markets, £1,000. That's your goal, yeah, every day. All right. So all you got to do is, work out one, is that realistic with the account size that I have? Two, is it better that I build some confidence beforehand? And obviously then scale my account. Maybe once I'm really, really confident, I put some more money into it, and then we can obviously then build it from there. But yeah, uh, can you please explain macros? That's gonna take me ages, ages and ages. I am actually gonna add on a bit more onto my course. I do cover, macros in my course. I did gold macros on the boot camp for the inner circle at the beginning of this month. So obviously that goes into a lot of detail. So I'm not sure if you're in the inner circle, but obviously that video is in there. I'm also going to add the boot camps onto the course as well. Um, Hi Dan, is it worth setting buy and sell limits depending on the direction of the, yes, that's obviously for the reason I've designed, my kind of zone entry system is to kind of help obviously people who are working. Yes, obviously it's better to monitor it and obviously manually enter, but if you can't, then I would use the touch, and then just obviously do 30% per entry, and obviously then you're going to be chilling. But just obviously one, you need to be monitoring it, because obviously the most important thing is if you've hit your target, all right, because then you're going to want to close out. Stephen, should we abstain from adding the position if price should breach the entry zone? So my kind of only rule here is if a 2 hour, because obviously I do everything on the 2 hour. If a 2 hour closes, not, it can't look like this. All right. If a 2 hour closes like this below my, zone, I'm going to start monitoring it closely. And chances are I'm not going to hold it until, stop loss. All right. Uh, Hi Dan, what time frames do you use? Only the 2 hour? Basically, I don't even look at candles now. All right, because if you think about it, candles are subjective too, and I think everyone will agree here that if you're in a trade, right, and say for example you're in a buy trade here, all right, say for example you bought, I don't know, from here, all right. I know that wouldn't, but we're going to use this as an example here, yeah. Right. So we bought from here, we're obviously extending stop loss, right? Being a bit naughty, but we're gonna the whole way through, we're gonna be looking at, different candles to then try and think, what, I'm gonna hold this more because right, let's go down to the 15 minute. Now let's wait and see. Yeah, we've got consolidation here. I'm gonna hold, or yep, do you know what? This is starting, it's starting. And then obviously we go down and down and down, until it makes us feel comfortable to kind of hold it, yeah? All right. Whereas I stick the 2 hour is the best intraday time frame, yeah? All right, it is the best. And yeah, I don't even look at candles. I am, if my zone hits, I am happy. I'm gonna enter. All right, anywhere within here. All right, and then yes, if we're breaking through, I'm then going to be kind of, monitoring it to be like, right, we've smashed through it. Am I gonna hold this? All right. Best for intraday. Hey, this is my first live with you. Been in the markets for a decade. Wow, nice. I'm in your public Telegram. Do you trade crypto? No. I don't. I hold crypto. I obviously have, USDT, and obviously I have some Bitcoin. I haven't got anything else. I've got rid of it. ARB is the only one which I am interested in. Was it ARB or APT? APT, I think it was. Or was it ARB? No, I think it was ARB, which I am, interested in, because, th this is obviously an alternative to Ethereum. And obviously, if gas fees get too high, if we do have this pump, then obviously, they're going to find alternative providers with cheaper gas fees. ARB obviously has that. So that's obviously one that's tip. But I've only put a tiny bit in. But no, I don't trade crypto because I do feel like it's manipulated. Do you trade prop firms? No, I don't like them, because the rules just are stupid. And I've obviously got friends who have who own them. They've explained how their companies work. So I personally would not trust it at all. I think it just tries to. I mean, it's very, very clever. Psychologically, it just speeds up everyone in regards to obviously what you're going to obviously be trading and everyone's hype. But I think anyone here who's ever got a funded account, I bet you there is more people who have made profit and haven't been paid. I mean, I'm obviously one of them. And that was even with a company like FTMO. I've obviously, not been paid. I've had so many, messages from obviously guys, not being paid. Uh, well, why would you trust it? If you are the crazy thing about trading, if you have got 12 months history of making 5% a month, right? I could show you probably 20 guys who would put, money in an account for you to trade it. All right, real, money, but no one has got that history. All right, and no one wants to spend that time, the time and effort. All you've got to show anyone, anyone who's wealthy. Like, for example, if someone come up to me now and goes, Dan, you know what, I got 12 months history. Do you want to, sponsor me or whatever, and we'll do a 80-20 split. If you got 12 months history, if you can show me that you can look after an account, of course I'm gonna, want you to trade my capital, but everyone tries to rush it. They don't have that. So yeah. What do you think about AI in trading? AI can trade properly like an expert. I don't think it can. I think like anything, do you know what? Like bots, like AI, like anything, you will always need a human to kind of make that, final decision. All right, because AI is no different to a bot. There is not a profitable trading bot out there. Like I've, learned that that's going to interest anyone. All right, there are bots, yes, which are going to make you, 1%, monthly. All right, it's brilliant. All right, but everyone in this FX space wants to make 20%, 100%, 300%, 500%, but percent. You can't do that without, manually, and you're obviously going to have that to have a you're going to have that that kind of overview. But yeah, but no, no, hope you guys have obviously enjoyed it. It's been, obviously there's lots of new, names here. If you want to obviously, see how we get on with it in a circle, drop us a message. There's obviously a big blue button in the channel, but I obviously do all of my lives like this. It's an open book. I don't hide anything. I can answer every question because obviously I've been doing this a long time, and obviously I do it all with you. So it isn't like someone's hiding and just sending out stuff. I'm documenting everything that I do. And so, yeah, appreciate everyone's time. Hope you all have a great, Sunday evening. Yeah. And obviously, hopefully we'll see some of you, newbies in the inner, circle. So have a good one, guys. Have a good one.